Joined now by our Wednesday insider, TSN hockey insider, Darren Dreger, of course, one half of the Rain Dregs hockey podcast. They've had a blast recording here this week, we're told. It's what happens when you get Ferraro together with his old Islanders teammates, so be looking for that on the Rain Dregs feed. First of all, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Hope you're well.
Yeah, doing well. Yeah, looking forward to a bit of a break, right? We all need some downtime. And in the business of covering pro sport, you don't often get that. So even when in my world as an insider, I always look for like July 5th, because at that point I'm like, I don't care who's a free agent anymore. I'm out. I am out. You look forward to the passing of the trade deadline, which is this year, March 3rd. And then you look forward to the holiday roster freeze. Because
right.
At that point, you can kind of just exhale and go, okay, well, I still have to work. I have things to do, but I'm not kind of beating my phone to death 24/7.
You're not going to be doing a huge long form piece on Zub signing in Ottawa?
No. Well, there's a funny backstory to that. So I don't know if you noticed or not, insider trading. Pierre LeBrun was a no-show, and I've lived his life. He had some responsibilities. Blake, you're in it too with minor hockey and sport. And he just assumed that in the freeze, we wouldn't have insider trading, even though we do insider trading Tuesdays and Thursdays. So he had one child that was in a 3:00 in the afternoon game. He had another child that was in a 6:00 p.m. game. So he's like going two different directions. So it ended up being Chris Johnson and I, and we were kind of dreading it leading up to Tuesday when we do it, because again, in the freeze, we don't fabricate anything, but you do have to kind of get a little bit creative.
You have to say something. You have to say something.
What your topics are going to be, which was kind of my Vancouver item, all kidding aside. But there's Chris Johnson coming out of left field with the news that Artem Zub was expected to sign his extension with the Ottawa Senators, which I know frustrated Sens management that the news got out. But lo and behold, CJ was bang on the money, and Artem Zub gets a 4-year deal at $4.6 million AAV. So it wasn't a wasted edition of Insider Trading.
And Artem Zub will never headline an Insider Trading ever again. Frankly, the Ottawa Center should be happy that their guy got that high up Insider Trading. And, of course, you went to old standby here, the Vancouver Canucks. And the report, Darren, that the Canucks are hoping interest in their players picks up in January. Hoping being a key word there, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, we can all appreciate and understand the reluctance, not from Vancouver's perspective, but any team that has inquired historically. It's not like Tyler Myers' name is new, to the wheel of speculation. Of course, that name has been out there, but he's got a year left at $6 million, a signing bonus of $5 million. So there's a chunk of change that needs to get absorbed there. But in just poking around the league a little bit, there is a general belief that if the right fit is available with a new opportunity, maybe in a more structured environment, there's that word again in association with the Canucks and Bruce Boudreau, that Tyler Myers can rekindle his game and can find it again. And I believe that to be true, because that doesn't come out of Vancouver. That comes from other sources. Now, where is the right fit? How do you make the dollar in, dollar out concept work? And then on top of that, you've got a player in Tyler Myers who doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want to leave. He likes Vancouver. His family likes Vancouver. Does he want to win? Of course he wants to win. Every player wants to win. And he does have the modified no trade clause. So to some degree, he's got some say in this process, but there is a growing belief that, Tyler Myers, who many of us thought until recently was not likely going to be traded just because of everything we've talked about contract related, it may not be that far-fetched. And come closer to the March 3rd trade deadline, maybe there is a right fit for Tyler and for the Vancouver Canucks and the team that wants him.
And he's the guy that gets chance after chance after chance because can't teach size, got mobility, got some puck skills. Last year had a good defensive year. So, I mean, he's the type of guy who has to prove he cannot play. We're obviously talking money having to come back or money to be retained in any kind of Myers deal for this year.
Yeah.
Fair?
Fair. I think the perfect scenario would be, the Vancouver Canucks take back an expiring contract, right? And maybe they have to present a sweet, well, not maybe, if they're not retaining money, they're going to have to apply some type of sweetener into that type of transaction, I would think, unless, again, you get that fit where a team just feels like his experience, his character, the belief that he's going to rebound is strong enough that they can, excuse me, actually make a hockey deal. So we'll see. There's lots of options in play.
That's the problem with the modern player, and we've talked about this before, is there's a lot of great players that are just paid too much. Tyler Myers can absolutely help a playoff team. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But do you want to carve out $6 million worth of space under your cap to wedge him in? Everybody understands why the salary cap is there, but it presents some issues in cases like that. Although, hey, maybe it's perfect for Tyler Myers because he said he doesn't want to leave. So there's that as well. It's a safety net for him too.
Yeah, and I'm not making a comparison to the player that I'm about to mention, but now it's become more acceptable because every team makes signing mistakes. They just do. I'm thinking of Scott Gomez. Remember back in the day?
Yeah.
And when he got to Montreal, he was not the player that they needed him to be for the money that he was earning. And I remember having conversations around Gomez when he said the contract was the worst thing ever. Great thing for lifestyle and family and security and all of that. But trying to live up to that contract when it's just not possible is mentally tough. Really, really difficult. There isn't a player in pro sport that doesn't want to overachieve and excel and become great. So I'm sure Myers kind of fits into that.
Yeah, Wade Redden too. I don't know that Wade Redden was ever an NHL player, but that contract, of course, forced it to be back in the old rules. The list of who is absolutely untradeable on this team got a lot of news this week, and it's more of a chatter fodder than anything else. You tell me, does it ever become an advertisement for some of the star players to think that so-and-so's untouchable? Do you think that ever makes somebody bite and say, oh, really, he didn't put Quinn Hughes on the list, maybe I'll make a call of it? Do you think that ever works?
No. And how many teams or managers would actually put names on a list? Mm-hmm. And I know you're using that as a descriptive point, but you do see memos that go out, teams that do send emails periodically and say, okay, we're shopping this player. Let's just make this abundantly clear. You're not doing that with any player that might be perceived as being untouchable. And Quinn Hughes would be that. Pettersson would be that. I mean, go down the list. But sometimes those calls can lead to something else too. I can't for the life of me believe that the Vancouver Canucks would consider anything that drastic. So for me, it's a non-story. But when media presents something like that there are a few untouchables, that definitely sparks a market without question, where, now you do have teams calling and saying, I mean, look, this sounds absurd, but there's no way you'd give up on Pettersson, or is there any chance on, all of that. And of course, Patrick Allvin is going to say, no, I don't know where that came from.
Can I get you into a Connor Garland today?
Well, hey, besides that, that's where you get into the concept of untouchables, because that's when Allvin would say, okay, here are the guys I'm not trading and I don't want to talk about. Anyone else? Let's have a conversation on, and then it goes from there.
What's the last thing you heard on Horvat and Besser?
Yeah, pretty quiet, other than, as you would expect. Two very good players. And when you're coming up to a critical date, which the roster freeze is, then you are going to have some elevated conversations. And I think that's exactly what went down with Patrick Allvin leading up to the holiday freeze, but nothing more than encouraging conversation. So, nobody's looking at a deadline other than March 3rd, but it is expected that the action around those players and the Canucks in general is going to heat up at a varying point in January, and that's not that far away. So let's not get caught up on that and say that, okay, it's likely one or both of those guys is going to be moved early in the new year, but the expectation is that the interest, or at least the tire kicking, changes from serious trade conversation, if not negotiation, at some point early in the new year.
I wanted to ask you, and only because we had heard from you earlier in the year that the Dallas Stars were interested in adding some scoring, adding a forward. Denis Gurianov, who's really struggling for them this year, granted an indefinite leave from the team right now to deal with the family matter. He's on a $2.9 million ticket, Dregs, as an RFA to be with Arbrights. You wonder if Gurianov has played his final game. Maybe for the Dallas Stars, but that's a chunk of change that could move the other way to get a salaried player. So does this make it more likely that Dallas would be in on the type of guys like Besser, like Horvat, as they continue to search for reinforcements?
Yeah, right. It could, and it's a curious list of the potential players in play, and many of them are rock solid in play, and we know Besser and Horvat. And then I'm looking at St. Louis kind of bob and weave in the Western Conference, and the names of Tarasenko and O'Reilly are definitely out there, and it feels like Doug Armstrong is going to make a play at some point. But you also then have to match the players available with the teams of need. And you're right, Matt, I've said for a while now that, the Dallas Stars would like to add an experienced forward to complement that line with Seguin and Marchment. And Jimmy Hill, the general manager of the Dallas Stars, is less forthcoming on the specifics, but that's just management, right? Because he's also looking at some of the younger pieces that they have, and you need to make sure that what you have in-house isn't ready or isn't going to help you push as deep as you want to push, before you start big game hunting. So there might be a little bit of a difference in what the needs are between the players, the coaching staff, and ultimately management. But I also know that Dallas is in it here, right? They look at the play of Jamie Benn and how good he's been. I mean, he's had a resurgence. Likewise with Seguin and some other pieces. Their goaltending is terrific. So it's a little early, but I'd be surprised if Jim Nill and Patrick Galvin don't have conversations about one of those players. But the money has to work. It just has to.
Yeah. The former home of the Stars is an interesting study, too. How the heck are the Minnesota Wild, as competitive as they are, with all that money tied up with Parise and Suter still, and they have cap space to boot here, Dregs, and could be a buyer at the deadline as well? How? Yeah. How are they doing it?
Well, I mean, good management for starters, and doesn't that begin with, you can just envision the conversation that Billy Guerin had to have with his owner, Craig Leopold, when he made the suggestion, the pitch, that they needed to buy out Suter and Parise. And by the way, your cap hit is going to be just stupendous for the foreseeable future. So there's that. I think Dean Evison is a highly underrated coach. And I think that Evison and Guerin are 100% on the same page. And when you're locked like that, then the messaging to the players is direct. And here's how we need to play. And it doesn't matter what your age is or your experience shows us, we need you to play a certain way. And Evison has that group playing that way. So that allows Billy Guerin to manage with a little bit different of an approach. Would he love to acquire Brock Besser? Of course he would. He looks at his team. He likes what he sees. He believes that Brock Besser is a 25-goal guy. He would fit nicely for a bunch of reasons, but there is that money thing. The Wild feel like if they can get through this year and they can clean up some other areas and not have to give up on a young piece like a Greenway or somebody like that, that they're a team that is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the not-too-distant future. And I tend to agree. I'm still a little unsettled with their goaltending, to be fair. But that hasn't been an issue of late, so we'll see if that changes in the second half.
The one thing to remember with Minnesota is as expensive as Parise and Suter are this year, they get even more expensive next year as buyouts. Yeah. It's an additional $2 million on those buyouts next year.
Yeah.
Plus they have RFAs like Addison, Gustafson, and Boldy to deal with. So the future cap space in Minnesota remains a bit of a question mark, but you're quite right. Like, they have cap space right now, and they also have a pretty flush prospect pipeline. Lastly, Dregs, I imagine we're going to hear more and more of these names in 2023 as we get down to March 23rd. But Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, is this a last Christmas in Chicago for the duo that brought 3 Stanley Cups to that city?
It feels likely. I mean, they're on expiring deals. What's interesting is, will they finish the year with Chicago? And, I think that's what intrigues most of us. And what I know is that, Chicago is going to be as respectful as you would expect them to be. I mean, Kane and Toews, among others, of course, brought greatness to the city of Chicago in the sport of hockey. So that carries some weight with the Wirtz family. Kyle Davidson has to be patient as GM. He doesn't have a choice. If Patty Kane through Pat Brisson comes to him at some point in the second half and says, look, I want to chase that Stanley Cup again, I feel healthy enough, then, the gates flood open and Brisson goes his way, Davidson goes his way, and they try and find the right fit. But it's not like if they get to that place, and I include Toews in this, there's going to be a list of 10 teams. That's not going to be the case. I mean, you're talking about decorated champions here, who, if they decide that they want to move to chase that Stanley Cup, are likely going to give management a team, 2 teams, maybe 3 teams, and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, and you wonder if teams that are in on Kane and Toews, or hoping to be in on Kane and Toews, if Horvat and Besser are of any interest, similar positions and profiles there. Dregs, out of time. Marvelous stuff. Thank you for everything in 2022, my friend, and look forward to catching up already back in January 2023.
My pleasure. Happy holidays to you guys.
Happy holidays.
And to you. Look forward to the backyard rings on Christmas Eve.
It's coming.